Dear children, welcome to the next session on the chapter Heredity and Evolution. In this module, we are going to learn how the inheritance of one pair of character is independent of the inheritance of the other pair of character as stated by the third law of inheritance, namely law of independent assortment proposed by Mendel. We learnt about the law of independent assortment in the last module, which states that the segregation of one pair of character is independent of the other pair when two pairs of traits or characters are combined in a hybridization experiment. We can use a Punnett square to easily understand the independent segregation of these two genes during meiosis and the production of pollen grains and eggs. For example, in the dihybrid cross experiment conducted by Mendel, the genotype of the seed obtained by Mendel in F1 generation was capital R, capital Y, and small y. Now let us consider the segregation of one pair of genes, capital R and small r. Here, 50% of the gametes have capital R gene and 50% have small r gene. Now apart from each gene having either capital R or small r, it must also have the alleles capital Y and small y. Here it is important to note that segregation of 50% of capital R and 50% of small r is different from 50% capital Y and 50% small y. Hence, 50% of the gametes bearing small r has capital Y and the remaining 50% has small y. Similarly, 50% of the gametes bearing R has capital Y and remaining 50% has small y. Therefore, the genotype of the gametes are four types, namely the capital R, capital Y, capital R, small r, capital Y, and small r, small y. In other words, there are four types of eggs and four types of pollen. And we can see that the frequency of these gametes is 25% or 1/4 of the total number of gametes produced. Now the allelic composition of the zygotes of the F2 plants can be easily obtained by the Punnett square as shown. As you already saw, there are four different types of phenotypes that are found in the F2. And the phenotypic ratio is 9:3:3:1. How 9 different genotypes result from the F2 hybrid, and the genotypic ratio is 1:2:1:2:1:2:1:2:1. Thus, from the dihybrid cross experiment, Mendel found that the gene combination of the progeny differs from parental gene combinations. Dear children, Gregor Mendel, the father of modern genetics, he conducted hybridization experiments on garden peas for almost 7 years, and finally he proposed the Mendel's law of inheritance in living organisms. His first generalization was the law of dominance, which states the expression of only one of the form of the parental traits in the F1 hybrid. That is, the F1 generation always displays only one of the parental traits, that is the dominant trait. His second law of inheritance was the law of segregation, which states that for any trait there are a pair of alleles, and these pair of alleles of a gene split so that only one gene passes from each parent to an offspring through the gamete, and that's called as the law of segregation. And the law of segregation is called as the universal law of inheritance. From the dihybrid crosses conducted by Mendel, he arrived at the third law of inheritance, the law of independent assortment, which states that completely different pairs of alleles are passed into the offsprings independent of each other. That means the inheritance of one trait is completely independent of the inheritance of the other trait. Thank you.